So as long as there have been colleges and universities, there has been a divide between the college and the place that it's located in. I think it's no surprise that some of the wealthiest universities in the country are located in cities, in towns that don't necessarily have a lot of resources. And it leads a lot of local communities to ask, what is this university doing for us? And to cause a lot of friction there, as well as a lot of social justice issues, since you have so many resources pouring into these big universities and not as many resources pouring into the local communities. So there's a lot of ways we might think of to solve or alleviate this problem, right? One of which is to, surprise, surprise, actually give the community some resources. Wow. But in a smaller level, one thing that universities are trying to do is to do more what they call community engagement. There's many forms that this takes and many different ways that you can do community engagement, but one specific approach is to have local organizations work with a class of students to do research, do analysis, produce documents, and do kind of like small-scale projects for the local community. And theoretically, these kinds of partnerships can work out really great for all the parties involved, right? So the professor gets some actual cachet with students to say like, hey, this is not just my own scenario. Students also benefit from that real world experience, from being out in the community. The students also learn about their communities and some of the like justice issues that are affecting the places that they live. And most importantly, the community partner benefits, right? So local nonprofits, local organizations can get research done, can get grant funding, can get documents and websites and products made that maybe they wouldn't have had the time and energy to do otherwise. But unfortunately, those are only the benefits in theory, because in practice, many community partnerships are not able to achieve that balance between the class and the community partner.
Having been in community engagement spaces since, for now, about a decade, and seeing a lot of collaborations and projects that don't feel equitable and don't feel like we as academics are pulling our weight, are fulfilling our promises.
That was Carrie Grant, the author of Collaborative Tactics for Equitable Community Partnerships Towards Social Justice Impact, published in the IEEE Transactions on Professional Communication. In the article, Carrie talks about her long-term collaboration with the Family Survivor Network, or FSN, a small nonprofit in Baltimore, Maryland that serves the surviving loved ones of homicide victims. Carrie teaches at Towson University, just a short distance from FSN headquarters, and has been collaborating with them on community engagement projects for the better part of 4 years through a Towson program called Give. As Carrie talks about in the article, one of the big problems with community engagement is that it's all too easy for the needs of the students and the experience of the students to outweigh the needs of the community partner. So that the students still benefit a lot, the students still get a lot of great experience, but the community partner doesn't get anything of value, and indeed might even like waste their time doing that work. So at best, the community partner might put up with that community engagement and say, this isn't the best experience for me, but I guess I'll do it so that I get some engagement with the university at all, even though it kind of sucks. And at worst, it can actively damage the reputation of the university with the community partner, or even do harm to the local community. And so with those potential harms in mind, Carrie turns her article's focus to this idea of equity and equitable community partnerships.
But I think that looking at it through an equity lens, as community engagement has evolved, is a really valuable tool to make the collaboration not so transactional, and to really think about it in terms of like historical inequities and burdens of who's doing what kind of labor and what is an outcome for an organization that is worthwhile and worth their time.
So the key question for me is, how do we do this, right? It seems very hard. It seems quite challenging. How do we actually work with community partners in a way that doesn't just exacerbate the existing inequities between the university and the community? How do we do those projects in a way that actually supports the community's goals rather than just the classroom? So in order to figure out these questions, in order to answer this, I had the opportunity to not only talk to Carrie, but also with Thea Robertson. Carrie's former graduate student, and Dorian Walker, who is the executive director of Family Survivor Network and also Carrie's main point of contact. So the first tactic that Carrie offers in trying to achieve these types of equitable partnerships is to do what she calls balancing perspectives, which is both understanding a little bit about the community that you're about to go out into, as well as understanding your own potential biases in doing community-oriented work.
Hopefully their supervisor and other interns and talk about like your position in the world. Like, what privileges do you have that the people that you will ultimately serve don't have? What biases are you carrying about the people that you serve? And like just sit with those and discuss those, not with the people that you're serving, but with your fellow interns and your supervisor and things, to avoid doing harm. Ultimately, we can't prevent harm from happening, but if you can reduce it, you should make every effort to do so.
At the core of it, it's just a level of self-awareness, right? Like, am I an email person or do I communicate on the phone? How often do I respond to my emails versus those who respond on the phone, right? I have the magnitude of the capacity to do such as this, or I may be a grammarian, right? And I may use certain language or rhetoric, right? And then I may speak what's comfortable or what may flow off of, the tongue, right? And do we provide space to contextualize that so that when we're doing the work, there's a true understanding, the intentionality meets the output, right? Or meets the outcome.
The thing that struck me about this particular tactic is all of the work that the professor needs to do to prepare students before they actually go out and start engaging with those community partners. So understanding the history of injustice that may have actually affected that community in the past, understanding the existing inequities that continue to push forward into the current situation. These are all things that professors got to do and present to the class before they ever step into the room with that community partner.
We like to have student participants start in one of our grant writing classes where we really build a foundation with theoretical readings, introductions to community engagement, and understanding of the background and history of Baltimore. So we're really having those conversations in class first, just amongst ourselves, that then they have that foundation and understanding and background before they enter into a community space.
From there, Carrie talks about compatibility, which is essentially trying to figure out not only is the organization and the class compatible before the class begins, but also kind of continually along through the process, figuring out, is the organization actually benefiting from the partnership?
Folks always talk about compatibility and like, is the partnership a good fit? And so we extended that idea by thinking about how we can align our goals and really explicitly making sure we're on the same page, even if we're coming from different places with it, that there is a clear understanding of where we're heading so that there isn't misunderstanding, disappointment at the end of the process because we weren't clear on what our goals actually were.
You don't come in with your own ideas at first. You talk to the ED or whoever the point of contact is at the organization to get their priorities and find one that matches your professional priorities. So you're not starting with yourself. And that would be my advice for any like intern who's doing this type of work or any students doing this type of work, is that yes, you have your own like professional goals, but yours don't come first. Like, you're modeling what you want with what the organization needs, right?
So it doesn't just seem like I have to do this because it is an internship requirement, right? And so then there's a level of compatibility. So we know those who may really are in it for some type of distributive justice, are looking for something that could be both mutually tangible to the organization, but mutually tangible to them as well. And then that in itself synergizes with commitment, right? Those who are compatible to the work show up.
As Dorian is getting at there, when there's a strong compatibility between the organization and the students, it breeds this final tactic, which is this idea of commitment. And I think that commitment is both the most important and kind of like the hardest one to get a handle on, because it's not only being committed to the philosophy of the organization or being committed to the idea of helping them, but being like present and being there in the space to show that commitment to the organization.
Of like showing up in person to couple projects that they may had to physically do, without me even noting it. So like, let's say Thea wrote a grant for us to get a youth coordinator, right? She showed up to the technical assistance sessions, like legit, like in community, in the neighborhood, like participated.
Going to the meetings and going to the physical space of FSN and like being in fellowship with Dorian and getting to know him and him getting to know me. So that way, when we did talk about the work, it wasn't like, oh, here's this person trying to get things from me. It's more like, oh, here's my friend Thea. We're going to talk about the work, and hopefully in the conversation, whatever I need comes up and she can do it.
We've really tried to commit to showing up wherever the organization most needs us, and being available and listening to what it is that he needs, right? Rather than trying to approach it as like, this is an extra project we're asking you to do with service learning, but really trying to think about, okay, no, how are we able to lighten the burden of what it is you're working on by supporting your work?
So it's clear from talking with Carrie, Dorian, and Thea that doing community engagement in this like equitable way, where the community partner is actually seeing that benefit, takes a lot of time and takes a lot of energy. But you can also see, I think, in the way that they talk about that partnership, that there are such great benefits to doing the work.
Like, I can't tell you how many times I hear a person tell me, I heard about you through Give or a student. I have no expectation or thought for those students to even be mentioning me or the organization, but they do. So I think those small, minute nuances make all the difference. It makes all the difference. It's sensory, and I value it. I value it a lot.
For me, what is like the best thing about the work that I've did with Give is that it like lives up to like my own personal values and like things like that. I didn't have to compromise my values to do the work, which unfortunately happens a lot of the time in the real world. And I see that with what Dorian is doing with FSN. So the fact that I helped in any shape or form for FSN to get to that point is just like, I feel really good about, and I'm proud to be in association with them.
Technical and professional communication in recent years has made this turn toward attention to social justice. And I just am such a proponent of community engagement as a way to fulfill that aim of our field, is to think about the ways we can have an impact in the communities where our universities already live. If there's one takeaway I hope people have from the article, it is to prioritize and assess your impact in your community partnerships.
So to bring back to my original question, how do we do this? How do we do community engagement, but also make it equitable for the partners? And the answer seems to be put in the time, right? There's a lot of time investment in the class, preparing students. There's a lot of time investment actually being present for the community partner. And it's not to discount all that time that it takes. But I also think that if we're going to be doing community engagement, if we're going to be going out to those communities and saying that it is socially just work, we need to make sure that it is actually benefiting the communities that we're working with. So that's been our video. Thank you so much to Carrie, Dorian, and Thea for sitting down with us to talk about the article and their experiences with community engagement. I strongly recommend you take a look at the article for specifically laying out those tactics. We've got that down in the description and the link. And other than that, we'll see you in the next video.